XRP is still showing impressive strength even after Bitcoin took that dip down to around $114,000. Totally expected, right? I've got some exciting insights to share from 10 different XRP chart analysts. And get this, one of them actually called XRP the most bullish chart in crypto. Those were their exact words. Though honestly, you probably saw this coming from a mile away. XRP has been absolutely crushing it as the top performer among all the top 100 coins since election day. And here's the thing, we're nowhere near finished. Before we dive deeper, I want to be totally upfront with you. I don't have any financial background whatsoever. I'm definitely not giving financial advice here, so please don't make any buying or selling decisions based on anything I share. I'm just someone who's passionate about crypto and loves creating YouTube videos about it as a fun hobby. Right now, as I'm recording this, XRP is sitting at $3.12 and Bitcoin's at $117,309. Check out XRP's 24-hour low. It dipped all the way down to $3.02 this morning. And Bitcoin? Well, that's quite the interesting chart. It dropped to $114,910. You're absolutely right. XRP did move in a similar direction. But here's what's really catching my attention. It never broke below that $3 mark. That's pretty remarkable when you think about it, especially considering what happened just a few days ago. Remember when the entire altcoin market got absolutely hammered while Bitcoin just sat there barely budging? I can't recall the exact price. Maybe it was around $118,000 or $119,000. But the point is, Bitcoin was moving sideways while XRP briefly dipped under $3. Now here's the fascinating part. This time, Bitcoin actually took a real hit, dropping down to that $114,000 range, which usually drags the entire market down with it. And sure, XRP did follow along a bit, but seeing Bitcoin fall that hard while XRP refuses to break below $3, that definitely jumped out at me, no question about it. We're talking about some serious strength here. It's honestly incredible to watch. Here's what Chart Animal's Credible Crypto posted last night, and he's talking about exactly that Bitcoin breakdown I just mentioned. He said, Bitcoin has finally broken down the lows as the prior support zone ended up giving way. Now we can finally get things moving. But here's the key part. He emphasized that this is just a lower time frame breakdown and doesn't mess with the higher time frame structure at all, so there's really nothing to worry about here. He also mentioned how great it was to see some of our favorite alts holding up incredibly well despite Bitcoin's drop. Exactly. XRP held up like a champ. What he's getting at is that from the big picture perspective, this changes absolutely nothing. It's just a lower time frame thing. Not only is this not a big deal, but he actually saw it coming. The fact that everything played out exactly as he expected, not surprising at all. This isn't the time to get scared or play it safe in the crypto market. This isn't the time for fear. This is the time to get excited. Here's a post from chart analyst Khalil, who just shared this with his massive 713,000 followers on X. He's definitely one of the bigger names and more well-known analysts on the platform. He posted this Bitcoin chart and said, nice little retest of the breakout with last night's dip. Now send it higher. So he was totally expecting this too. And get this, he posted this just a few hours ago. He saw it coming because, honestly, this kind of thing is just normal crypto behavior. He's calling it bullish and expects things to head higher from here. That's exactly what I keep hearing from analysts who are weighing in on this whole situation. They're all saying the same thing. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Sentiment. I'm a huge fan of their work because they're just so incredibly data-driven. You've got to love that approach. They wrote, while Bitcoin and XRP are seeing low greed levels, Ethereum's plus 147% gain since early April still has traders bullish. Look, I'll be honest with you. This shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Ethereum was trading in the absolute gutter against both Bitcoin and the US dollar. So the fact that it bounced back, which I actually predicted it would, not talking price predictions here, just that it would recover, makes total sense. When people were calling Ethereum dead, that was honestly one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. The fundamentals never changed. They were still solid the whole time. If the fundamentals were strong enough to carry Ethereum for over a decade, and those fundamentals haven't gotten worse, they've actually improved, then what exactly would make you think the price should stay down? You'd have to be pretty clueless or just completely miss the bigger picture to believe that. So yeah, Ethereum's price recovery, totally expected. But here's the thing about greed levels. What do you think happens after Ethereum shoots up the way it has? We're talking about going from around $1,400 all the way up to $3,800. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sentiment also mentions that markets move the opposite direction of the crowd's expectations, which actually makes Bitcoin and XRP pretty solid buy low candidates right now. They're basically saying that for anyone who's thinking about making a purchase, this might actually be a really great time to do it, if that's something you're considering, of course. Here's a post from chart analyst Dr. Cat that really hits the nail on the head. He says, though XRP looks much weaker on lower time frames the last couple of days than other altcoins. But this is very deceiving because on the monthly, it's one of the most, if not the most bullish chart in crypto. XRP has a very interesting tendency to look terrible for a decent amount of time until it goes vertical with no retrace and no mercy for sideliners. And honestly, that's XRP in a nutshell right there. Having watched this thing's price action from the front row for the better part of a decade now, I've been here since 2017. I can tell you that's absolutely spot on. XRP just beats people up emotionally. It breaks them down. The price typically moves sideways or drops for these incredibly long stretches. We're talking years sometimes. That's just how it trends, always has been. But then it absolutely rockets. I have no idea why, but it's been like this for XRP's entire existence. You either have exposure when that magical moment happens, or you don't. And the only way you're going to have it is if you don't wimp out and panic sell every time it dips, just a tiny little bit. Here's a post from chart analyst E. Greg Crypto with an XRP/USD chart. He breaks down what he calls the three regions of the cycle top and the many count wave. For region 1, which he's marked as this red area and calls the most sell-off zone, he says it aligns with the inverse 1.236 to 1.618% of wave 4, putting XRP around $4 to $6. This is where the OGs will be cashing in big. I recommend following their plan. That's some solid wisdom right there. Without getting too deep into my own buying strategy, I've talked about it plenty on this channel, I will say this is something I haven't mentioned much before. I might actually sell some XRP for the first time when it hits a little over $5, maybe around $5.50 or so. It'll be somewhere in that ballpark. My first sell will probably be around 5% of my XRP holdings. Ideally, I'm planning to sell most, if not all, of my XRP somewhere between $5 and $8. But here's something I haven't really talked about much on this channel. I actually do plan to sell at those prices, assuming we get there. And I'm not making predictions here, but honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see $8 or higher this cycle. Personally, I'm planning to sell the vast majority of my XRP closer to that $7 to $8 range. That would be perfect. I'll start unloading more heavily once we get a bit above $6, and definitely when we're above $7. At that point, it's like, okay, time to take profits, because it's going to be absolutely life-changing money for me, and I've got to lock it in. Here's the thing. Even if XRP doubles from there and hits something crazy like $16, it honestly wouldn't matter that much. The life-changing part is already baked in at those lower levels, so I need to make sure I actually capture it. Sure, doubling it again would be nice, but would it change my life as dramatically? Not really, but here's the thing. Even though I don't know for sure it'll happen, I actually think 16 XRP this cycle isn't remotely crazy. I think there's a really good chance that could actually happen. But for me personally, what's the point of risking it? After nearly a decade of everything I've been through with XRP, am I really going to risk that much life-changing wealth just to maybe double it, when doubling it isn't nearly as big a deal as simply securing what I already have? Come on, that would be nuts. Now, he also mentions region 2 as most possible. This region is based on the wave 5 count and equals wave 1, or 61.8% of wave 1 plus 3. When he runs those calculations, he gets a potential XRP price of around $11 to $13. Yeah, I think a lot of people are definitely going to be targeting that range. People who've been here for a long time and bought in cheap, I think many of them will be like me. Though there will be some who decide to sell at least part of their stash in that $4, $5, $6 region we talked about earlier. You know what's really obvious though? Once XRP hits above $10, wow, can you picture the crazy FOMO that's going to kick in? Those massive green candles everywhere. Here's the thing about people. Nobody wants to buy any asset, XRP included, when it's actually cheap. Everyone wants to jump in when it feels safe. And I say feels safe because it doesn't actually mean it is safe, especially after it's already shot up so much. People just want that validation, right? If something's already run up big time, suddenly everyone thinks, okay, this is the safe bet. That's just how we're wired as humans, but honestly, it's completely backwards thinking. Now here's where it gets really interesting. He talks about Region 3, the high-end scenario. This is the exciting part. And look, I have no idea if this will actually play out, but the price range he's talking about isn't totally nuts. He's suggesting we could see XRP hit anywhere from $27 to $30. Could it happen? Maybe. Is it crazy? Not really. Will it actually happen? Your guess is as good as mine. We'll just have to ride this out and see what unfolds together. So chart analyst Zoom just dropped a post, and he's basically calling out some folks on X who've been saying XRP is in wave 3. He's like, nope, that's just not right. According to him, wave 3 already happened when XRP shot up from $0.5 all the way to $3.39. That was a massive 575% jump. He's saying we're actually in the final stretch now, wave 5. And here's the thing about Elliott wave theory. Wave 3 is usually the powerhouse move, stronger and longer than wave 5. So for this last wave, he's looking at targets between $7 and $10. Now, I'm not sure if he thinks that's where it'll actually top out, but it definitely seems like that's his read on things. What's interesting is you're seeing a bunch of analysts landing around that $10 mark as their upper target, and these are actually the more cautious predictions. Most seem to think it'll push even higher than that. They might be onto something, but here's what I've noticed over the years. The real answer usually falls somewhere between the most conservative estimate from a solid chart analyst and the most bullish one. No clue where exactly in that range, but that's typically how these things play out. Guess we'll find out soon enough. Maybe chart analyst Zoom nails it. He's definitely earned some credibility. Look, if XRP actually tops out somewhere between $7 and $10, okay, I'll be honest, I'm a bit skeptical of that range, but I've got to admit I really don't know for sure. There are several reasons for my skepticism, but what I just mentioned is definitely a big one. When you've got all these really talented analysts with solid track records, and they're giving you their low-end and high-end price targets, it's almost never actually the extreme ends that hit. In my experience, the reality usually lands right in that sweet spot somewhere in the middle. So hey, we're all just going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But honestly, most people are going to be absolutely thrilled no matter where we land in that range. I know I sure will be. Though I'll admit, if we peak right at $7, I'll probably be a tiny bit disappointed because that'll mean I didn't manage to sell off all my XRP holdings. But that's a pretty good problem to have, right? We'll just have to see what happens. So chart analyst XR Punky just shared his take, and he's looking at those Fibonacci levels up above as potential spots where people might take some profits during wave 3. But get this, he thinks it could actually push even further and hit around $13. His overall target range? Somewhere between $10 to $15. Pretty interesting stuff. So now we've got analysts on different sides, some saying $7 to $10, others calling for $10 to $15. Guess we'll find out who nails it. And honestly, in the crazy world of crypto, XRP hitting those levels wouldn't even be that wild, Especially when you think about how this thing has been held down artificially for what feels like forever. After all those years of being suppressed, a move like that would actually make a lot of sense historically speaking. Chart analyst Galaxy just weighed in with his take on XRP, and he's keeping things pretty straightforward. He's pointing out that just a few days back, we smashed through those all-time highs, and now we're just hanging out testing some support levels. But here's the kicker. He says once XRP breaks back above $3.30, that's when the real party starts. So clearly he's not sweating this current price action at all. He doesn't see anything particularly worrying about where we're sitting right now. In fact, he's been pretty loud and clear lately that he thinks this thing is headed way, way higher than where we are today. Guy's been really vocal about his bullish outlook over the past few days. So it sounds like he's just viewing this as a quick breather before the next big move up. Steph is Crypto just dropped a post that's got me pretty excited. He's talking about XRP seasonality being totally in our favor right now, and he's throwing out some wild targets, $10, $20, even $30. And you know what? When it comes to seasonality, the guy's absolutely spot on. Check this out. He's drawing parallels between where we are now and what happened back in 2017. And honestly, he's not wrong at all. Back then, we saw this massive pump in the first half of the year. Then XRP just kind of moved sideways for about 6 months. And then bam, that second major pump that really topped everything off. And here's the crazy part. That second wave was way more explosive than the first one when you look at XRP's price in dollars. I'm thinking we're looking at the exact same pattern playing out here. We already got our first big pump, we did our sideways dance for half the year, and now we're starting to break out. Actually, scratch that, we have broken out. Now it's just a waiting game to see how high this thing rockets. My gut feeling, it's going to go very, very high. Like, seriously high. Rakesh Upadhyay from Cointelegraph just broke down what's been happening with XRP, and it's pretty interesting stuff. He's saying that on Monday, buyers really tried to push XRP past that $3.66 resistance level, but the bears weren't having it. They dug in and held their ground. When that upward momentum stalled out, it probably spooked some of the short-term traders into taking their profits and running. That selling pressure ended up dragging the price down to the 20-day moving average around $2.96, which should act as pretty solid support. Here's where it gets interesting though. If XRP can bounce off that level with some real strength, the bulls are going to take another shot at breaking through $3.66, which is the all-time high depending on your exchange. If they actually pull it off this time, Upadhyay thinks we could see XRP climb to $4 and then maybe even $4.50. And honestly, that lines up perfectly with what I've been saying. I've put out tons of videos recently pointing out that pretty much every analyst out there who's looking at XRP's short-term price action is calling for the next big move to hit exactly that range. Some are even thinking we might blow past $5 pretty quickly. We'll see how it plays out, but I've got a feeling some major moves are coming way sooner than people think. This bull market definitely isn't over yet, though we're probably getting closer to the end than the beginning. So I came across this interesting post from chart analyst Cryptos about XRP on the 4-hour chart. They're eyeing that 21 MA moving average and thinking we might see a bounce back up to $3.24 in the short term. Apparently, that's a pretty key level they're watching. Then there's another post from chart analyst Casey Trades showing XRP testing that crucial $3 support level. They're asking if Wave 3 is about to kick off, which got me thinking. There was another analyst I mentioned earlier who was also talking about wave patterns. Honestly, I'll let these chart experts duke it out over whether it's Wave 3 or Wave 5 that's coming next. Here's the thing though, regardless of how you want to count these waves, I'm just not a chart analysis kind of person. I've got zero interest in becoming one either. You know why? Even if I spent all that time learning technical analysis and actually got good at it, it wouldn't change a thing about what I do. I'd still stick to my simple strategy, buy and hold. That's it. Why would I put in all that effort to learn something that won't change my approach? I'm a hodler through and through. I buy, I hold, and then I do absolutely nothing. Exactly. Why would I do all that heavy lifting and deep analysis when it won't change my game plan? That's just not my style. Instead, I'd rather gather a bunch of different perspectives from analysts I trust. And honestly, that tells me everything I need to know. Here's my approach. I follow analysts who have solid track records, and when you do that consistently, you start getting a really good sense of what's likely to happen next. The magic happens when most of them, or better yet all of them, are saying similar things. When that alignment happens, they're usually spot on. That's exactly why I love making these kinds of videos. I get to share these insights with you because they're genuinely valuable. There's real worth in seeing what the experts are thinking, especially when their views start lining up. So here's what I'm seeing right now, and you can call it whatever wave or pattern you want, but I think we're getting close to the end of this cycle. My gut tells me XRP has one more big rally left in the tank before this whole thing wraps up. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's going to shoot straight up without any bumps along the way. That's not how these things work. This final push could play out over the next few weeks or so, which would be pretty typical based on what we've seen historically. But after that, it's game over for this cycle. And here's the crazy part. Once this thing really gets rolling, it could all happen incredibly fast. We might literally be sitting here a month from now thinking, wow, that's already done. I'm not making a hard prediction here, but I'm just saying we're that close to the finish line. That's honestly what I believe. Anyway, getting back to the analysis, she mentions that XRP unfortunately couldn't hold that 3.21 resistance level and ended up pulling back to test that major $3 support again. But here's what's encouraging. We haven't made any new lows yet. It looks like we might have just finished a subwave, specifically wave 2 of this new trend, with a pretty deep 8.54% pullback. If this low keeps holding and so far so good, she's now watching for signs that a big impulse move, sub-wave 3, is about to kick off. Quick update since she posted this in the afternoon. XRP has actually bounced back nicely. It's trading higher now. I think it was around $3.12 when I mentioned the price earlier in this video. So yeah, it did hold above that support level. And remember that dip we had a day or two ago? Honestly, everything's blurring together at this point. It dropped down to around $2.98, give or take, depending on which exchange you're watching. Like I mentioned before, it's really holding up much better than last time around. Honestly, pretty impressive to watch. So she goes on to say that if we start seeing volume pick up and the price creeps back above that $3.21 resistance level, we could hit fresh highs pretty quickly. Her first target for Wave 3 is sitting around $3.82, which lines up with the 2.618 Fibonacci extension. Now here's something that caught my attention. She mentions this is around the historical all-time high that a lot of websites reference, though that's actually debatable. She's got it at $3.82, but it's actually $3.84. She's off by just 2 cents there. If you hop over to CoinMarketCap, you'll see they list $3.84. But here's the thing. That number is actually wrong. I've talked about this so many times in my videos. It all comes down to some bad data that got reported from Korean exchanges way back when. That's the short version of that whole mess. If you want the full story, just Google it and you'll find all the details. Anyway, she wraps up by saying this whole setup is giving her more confidence in her plan. She points out that a lot of people are feeling cautious after that recent sell-off, and others are already getting distracted by the weekend. In her mind, that makes it the perfect time for a surprise move. So here's the thing, everyone, the best part is still coming. This really isn't the time to get scared or worried. This is when we should be getting genuinely excited about what's ahead. Look, I'm not usually this pumped up about crypto because, let's be honest, most of the time we're just grinding through bear markets or slow periods. We're definitely not in those thrilling final stages of a bull run very often. But right now, we absolutely are. If history has anything to say about it, that euphoria phase is going to kick in sooner rather than later. This is one of those rare times when it actually makes sense to feel this excited. Most of the time, staying level-headed is the smart play, but moments like this, yeah, it's totally justified to get pumped up about what we're seeing. XRP is literally doing everything we always knew it was capable of. Think about it. Despite that brutal lawsuit and everything we've all been through over the past 5 years or so, we never stopped believing this was possible. And here we are. Just look at your screen. It's sitting comfortably above $3 like it's no big deal. We always had faith this day would come, and now we just need to stick it out a little bit longer. But I'm telling you, this thing is going to absolutely blow people's minds. That's pretty much a lock, as far as I'm concerned. Quick reminder though, I'm definitely not a financial advisor, and you shouldn't buy or sell anything based on what I'm saying here. That would be a really, really bad move.